So I guess we'll just get started here. First build we're going to look at is the Bargazin build. This is like the heaviest kind of leg class in the heavies, like the AOI series or whatever. VDA equivalent is the AOI Model 1, and I mean it's an alright leg. Back in the day it was definitely the bulkiest heavyweight leg that you could get, and in this game that's no different. Now what I'm doing with all of these frames is I'm going for roughly the same weapon loadout, and that is one that's got, effective damage, armor break, DPS, and it carries missiles, and we're going for Hovital and Tokunatsu because, well, it's a strong combo for heavyweights. So throughout these builds, frame is more or less equivalent, and the breakpoints that we're going for are Tansy, if we can get that, but primarily 3BR, which is the battle rifle that shoots 3 rounds. That hits like 200 and, or no, yeah, 2K-ish, like, 2036 about, I think. I forget, but anyways, so looking at this first build, we've got 134 booster, and high boost is, it's lagging beneath 300, but we're on Tokunatsu, so that really doesn't matter for a heavy. And KE, CE, TE are all very nice. KE does not block out Tansy, but who cares? We block out lamps. That's important. CE is enough to block out 3BR. And now you'll notice this 1334 number. That is the stability, or no, that's the recoil resistance, pardon me, of the AC in question. I know it's in Japanese, I can't read it either, but by comparison with the other editor, that is the recoil resistance number, and just below that is turning. So we've got 680 turning, and that really isn't very good at all. I mean, certainly you can play with that, but for most metagame situations, you want like somewhere around 800 turning, at least if you're like really being competitive. And then below that, you see EN. That's the regen's pretty nice. If we can keep it above 2000, we're pretty much safe with this booster generator combo. And of course, AP is sitting there at 38k, and that is quite lovely. So this is sort of like the baseline heavyweight build. It's a lot heavier than the average, but we're gonna move on and look at the average heavyweight build, I'd say, which this is on the AOI Model 2 or the old KT series legs. And this is probably the most balanced heavyweight leg. As you can see, I do lose Sphere, but I get a lot of, I get a little bit more boost power. My defenses are still, evened out. Turning jumps up to 700. EN regen goes up as well, but that's just because of taking off Sphere. And AP stays relatively the same. Recoil resistance just goes down a little bit, but we really don't lose that much for switching legs. So again, this is like the balanced heavyweight spec, I guess. With the previous legs, the Bargazin or the AOI Model 1, you could probably go more KE centric, but I don't know if you can still buff out 3BR. And that's something that I value, because if you didn't notice, that tears up heavies. Next build, we're moving on to well, more or less the frame that I use, and that's on the EME legs, or the LE2H-J-E34, which, I hate barcode names, but you know how that works. Anyways, the EME legs, you'll probably notice, have a lot better booster and high boost, although the CE defenses have dropped drastically. This only buffs out accuracy Lotus, which you're not really going to see all that much. However, some of the striking comparisons between the EME legs and the other two more heavy legs is that recoil resistance shoots up, turning is a little bit less, they have a little bit better regen despite me adding Sphere on here, which gives me amazing firing stability, and I would say prioritize firing stability if you don't need the armor. And then after that comes Drain, which Drain is an issue here, so our EN is pretty high. AP, however, we do lose about 4k AP. But I don't really find that to be a problem, because our booster and high boost have gone up considerably. I like to get my booster around 150 and my high boost around 300. And that's kind of a consensus, I'd say. Now, some of the more interesting things about the email eggs is that the normal stability, which is that 1105, just above the recoil resistance, that's actually, I don't know, I consider 1100 to be the break point for high stability legs. And what that means is that essentially you fire like you're using a different class of leg. In this case, it's almost as if I'm running a quad, because that stat is so high that'll increase fire rate considerably. It's not as big as it was in the previous game, but you'll definitely notice it. Also, we've switched away from a CE heads to a KE head, which is the HF227. That's probably where we get that extra egen, energy regen from. But yeah, that's mainly to get the KE number up there. Because I'd say blocking lamps is one of the most crucial things that you can do in this game. Because, I mean, not everybody runs lamps. Most people will run Jessup now. But it's just imperative that you block out KE damage. Because DPS is just scary. So this is more of like a medium-heavy build, I guess you could say. It's got mobility, but it doesn't exactly have the defenses that you'd like. Now, moving on, we're using the new leg series, which are the Flame and... I forget the rest of them, actually. I don't find them very interesting. Although you can see immediately that gives us about 50 more turning than some of the other heavier choices. Although we're forced to run a lot of weirder parts, I guess, to get our defenses into shape. And even then we're still a lot slower than some of the other ACs. However, this leg has pretty good recoil resistance. You can see we camp out at about 1532. And that isn't enough for Oxeye, but that does buff out USG, so you really don't need to worry about that. And our AP shoots up, but that's mostly because we're using a CE core. So if you want to use a tankier but slower AC that has good reactionary turning, I'd say look into the Flame and Flare legs. There, I remembered. And as you can see, these weapon loadouts are pretty much the same across the board, unless I couldn't fit them. The Flame series has about as much loading capacity as the others, although it has a little bit more than, a little bit less than Ime. And this is definitely a leg type that you could pack on more firepower if you wanted. Speaking of firepower legs, this is the Lilith mod of the Jawa legs, which are a little bit heavier than the Ime. They have a lot of CE defense, as you can see. I'm running the Fuchsie head on this because why not? This is a really slow leg type, but I can get it to run faster than the Flame series by adding a lightweight head with good stability, because I really don't need the defenses on this. This leg type can definitely buff out both Tansy and 3BR, but for the purposes of this little exercise, I'm trying to keep the stats more or less uniform. Well, I should be keeping the frame uniform, but I don't know. I wouldn't use a super heavy Lilith like this. I'd use one with the modified Fuchsie head. Because, again, I can get Sphere on here, and Sphere is great for heavies if you want to DPS things. Because I know Tansy and Cirrus, those fire really damn fast when you're on Sphere, as opposed to some of the bulkier KE arms or something. Defenses are pretty much the same across the board as they were in some of the heavier, or some of the other earlier heavy designs. We're at 2100 C, which I think that buffs out UBR if power spec, so you really don't need to worry too much about being hit by BRs. Recoil resistance is not quite that high. It doesn't actually buff out USG, but if you're far enough away from it, you won't have to worry. EN is considerably lower at only 3000, but you can play around that, it's fine. Turning is, well, 630. It isn't exactly the end of the world, but this is definitely a slow AC. Also, a stat that you're not seeing right now is jumping performance. And I can vouch for this. Lilith have terrible, terrible jumping performance. It's like if you told the tank that it didn't have to use its boosters to like lift up, that it could simply just like scoot up against a wall and sort of like try to hop up. It's hideous. Now here's another modification to the Lilith legs, which if you haven't noticed yet, they got like 8K loading capacity. So this is me trying to max out defenses and load capacity, which you'll probably see that the boost numbers are actually a little bit quicker than the Flame, despite me having amazingly higher defenses, great recoil resistance, and only a slight hit to turning. So this is the kind of frame that you'd want to run on Lilith if you didn't want to be silly and run modified Fuchsie. Although this is a very silly build to begin with, because I'm running Sown, Aught Crit, and Dual Salva with these crazy little yellow CE missiles on dual shoulder, which do a crapload of damage, and I'm running a Recon Jammer and Shield. So this is more of I guess you could say support AC. Yeah, AP is at 40k, and this is probably something that you're not going to be whittling down very easily. And that's all.